All right, so today we are going to talk about phonemic awareness and move over to slide number 2. So we'll talk about phonemic awareness, and in doing so, we're going to talk about phonemic awareness, phonics, and spelling. In discussing phonemic awareness and phonics, I think in order for you to understand it well, in order for you to be able to communicate intelligibly with kindergarten, first grade teachers, or other people such as reading specialists who you might be discussing a child's reading skills with, you need to understand some of the definitions of these of the words, the definitions of the words, vocabulary used by individuals who are oftentimes teaching these skills. So a number of the slides that I have for you today will just have sort of a list of definitions, and it will be important for testing purposes as well as your basic understanding of this information, that you understand what each of these words mean, and you'll be able to provide that to me whenever you take your tests. So a phoneme is a speech sound. It's the smallest unit of language, and it has no inherent meaning, right? So you have the word sun. The word sun has 3 phonemes that make it up, s, and n. And the word shut also only has 3 phonemes, despite having 4 different letters that make up that word. So it has the sound sh, t. There are, of course, as you hopefully know, 26 letters in the English language, but there are actually 40 phonemes that make up the English language. So sounds make up 250. There are 250 different spellings that make up our 40 phonemes. So you look at the letter F, the sound F rather, f, can be spelled in several different ways. You can use PH, F, GH, and FF. These are, this is part of what makes learning how to read difficult for students. So when we say words, our ears do not automatically hear the distinct sounds that make up those words, the phonemes that make up the words. The sounds that make up words are co-articulated. That is, they are not distinctly separate from each other. So co-articulation, specifically when producing speech orally, as in saying the word cat, we only hear one sound, not 3 as in cat, cat. The vocal apparatus merges the 3 sounds to permit rapid communication. So we read these 3 different sounds as one word or one whole to allow for rapid communication. I mean, think about if, whenever you were we were reading maybe that last part when we say words, and we said n, w, e, s, a, w, ts. I'm having a hard time breaking those up. But if we were having to, we had all those different phonemes broken up whenever we were reading, it would be really difficult we'd be really slow. And I guess we'd eventually understand things because that's how we would have heard it to begin with, but it would make communication much slower. So the vocal apparatus merges the 3 sounds to permit rapid communication, and it is the brain, not the ear, that recovers the sound segments from the acoustic bundle. Phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and manipulate sound in spoken words and understand that spoken words and syllables are made up of sequences of speech sound. It is essential to learning to read in an alphabetic writing system, and it's a very strong predictor of children who experience early reading success. So if you evaluate an individual's phonemic awareness early on, that is an extremely strong predictor of their later ability to read. Now, I want you to be very clear in understanding that phonemic awareness is not phonics. Phonemic awareness and phonics are 2 separate things. So phonemic awareness, you do not need to have letters present. It is just the awareness that words are made up of sounds, and you can manipulate those sounds. So that's what phonemic awareness is. So phonemic awareness is essential to learning to read an alphabetic writing system because the letters represent sounds or phonemes. Without phonemic awareness, phonics will make little sense for students. Phonemic awareness is fundamental to mapping speech to print. If a child cannot hear that man and moon begin with the same sound, or cannot blend the sounds r, n into the word run, he or she may have great difficulty connecting sounds with their written symbols or blending sounds to make a word. Okay, so phonemic awareness is fundamental to mapping speech into print. As I just said a second ago, phonemic awareness is not phonics. Phonemic awareness is auditory and does not involve words or alphabetic letters in print. So whenever we are providing phonemic awareness instruction, we do not need to have letters present. Sometimes we might just use, magnets, sticks, blocks of some sort, just to help kids understand that the words are made up of separate different parts. We might, whenever we start bringing in letters, then we are starting to work on phonics. Whenever we don't have letters present, we are working on phonemic awareness. So here's some definitions, as I was saying before. So a phoneme is a speech sound, is the smallest unit of language, and has no inherent meaning. You have continuous sounds, so continuous phonemes, so a sound that can be prolonged or stretch out without distortion. So examples are the letters R, S, S, A, and M, right? We have onset rhymes. So the onset is a part of the word before the vowel. So if we think of the word cat, the k is the onset part, and then the rhyme is the at part. So the rhyme is a part of the word, including the vowel and what follows it. And we have phoneme segmentation. It's the separation of words into its individual phonemes. And alphabetics is a science of representing spoken sounds by letters. So essentially it is phonemic awareness and phonics combined together. So whenever we assess phonemic awareness skills, as well as whenever we are just working with kids and teaching them phonics, there are some different skills that we should work on. So one of those skills is, I'm just sorry here, I wanted to make sure that I'm actually recording this. All right, so one of the skills that we should work on, is blending. So what word is made up of the sounds k, a, t? So we say those sounds slowly to students and we get them to blend them together. And that is phonemic awareness. I'm sorry, let me restate that because I messed up because I was trying still to pay attention to make sure things were recording. So blending is, so what word is made up of the sounds k, a, t, and the word would be, of course, cat, right? So that's getting them to blend sounds together. We might do more larger unit blending. What word is made up whenever we blend the two words hot and dog together? Hot dog. What words would we get when we blend ham and burger together? Hamburger, right? So we can do it, we can start off whenever a child is struggling with having larger word parts, and which are a little bit easier for the kid to do than if you're doing k, a, t, and making them blend the word cat together. You might also at first just do k and at so that they blend the word cat together. So this is blending. This is something easy that we could teach parents to do with kids. It's something that we could do while we are walking down the hall with them. So it can be easily practiced at all time because it doesn't require manipulatives. It doesn't require presentation of the letters themselves because we're just doing the sounds. Sound and word discrimination. So what word doesn't belong with the others? Cat, mat, bat, and ran. And of course, ran would be the word. You'd have to have at least 3 words here. So if you could make it a little bit easier and just do cat, mat, and ran and have the kid choose the word that's more difficult. Again, we might do things that are a little bit easier when we're beginning with a student. So cat, mat, and ton. So you just kind of, really change your cat, mat, and tip. So I think that might be a little bit easier because it's not a similar A sound in there. So these are different ways that we can work on word discrimination. And as the kid gets better at it, we start providing more difficult examples. Syllable splitting. And just kind of a last point, whenever, looking at this last example, we would not have the words present for them. They would need to just be doing this without the words. Syllable splitting, so we're doing break cat up into its beginning sound, which would be the onset rhyme, right? And then the remainder of the word. So we would have wanted them to do k and at. So before we were having them to put it together, more difficult than having them put things together is to break them apart. Again, you might start with larger things like what happens whenever we take the dip away from dipstick, and of course we get stick. So we can start with larger things and become smaller as the kids become more skilled at doing it. Phoneme manipulation, what word would you have if you changed the t in the word cat to n, and you would get can, right? So with this little more difficult level of phonemic awareness. And then segmentation, what are all of the sounds you hear in the word mop? M, ah, p. So why is phonemic awareness important? Well, becoming aware of the sound structure within syllables and words is made difficult. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not what I was supposed to be. So the acquisition of phonemic awareness is one of the necessary building blocks of reading development. You're not going to find a kid who can read well who lacks phonemic awareness skills. You have to have that phonemic awareness skills. Now, it's possible that kids might read poorly and lack phonemic awareness skills, but they're not going to be strong readers and lack phonemic awareness skills. So when we talked about problem solving the other day, phonemic awareness was the first thing that I had in there as the first thing that we look for to see whether kids are missing the skill or not. If they're missing phonemic awareness skills, we need to start teaching them those phonemic awareness skills, because otherwise they're not going to be able to read and comprehend well if they're missing this basic building block. Major factor impeding the development of decoding and word reading skills is a lack of phonemic awareness skills. So thus deficits in phonemic awareness skills impact the ability to develop accurate and fluent word reading capabilities, which in turn impacts the comprehension of written text. So becoming aware of the sound structure, the phonemes within syllables and words is made difficult because when communicating orally, the separate sounds composing an utterance cannot be heard by the ear due to co-articulation. So remember, that's what we had talked about, co-articulation earlier on, that whenever we hear words, whenever we are speaking, we are not saying those individual sounds, we're just blending them all together. So again, I'll say that statement. Becoming aware of the sound structure, the phonemes, within syllables and words is made difficult because whenever we communicate orally, the separate sounds composing an utterance cannot be heard by the ear due to co-articulation. We know that phonemic awareness skills that are often assessed in kindergarten, and I should say that should be assessed in kindergarten. So whenever we are looking at, you all might have heard that we're going to starting to have dyslexia screeners. It's going to be a requirement in the state of Georgia, and there are several other states that are also making this requirement. Whenever we are assessing phonemic awareness skills, or we're assessing phonemic awareness skills because it is a major predictor of students' later ability to read. So phonemic awareness skills assessed in kindergarten together with letter names, number names, and letter sounds are predictor for later reading difficulties. Letter knowledge is actually the number one, like the best predictor of reading difficulty. So just if you can only give one assessment in mid-kindergarten, assessing kids' letter knowledge is probably the best predictor of later reading difficulties. Students who perform poorly there are going to perform or are likely going to have great difficulty with reading later on. Now that could be due to a various number of factors, such as maybe kids aren't getting that, like they're going to be getting letter naming and letter sound instruction in kindergarten. All teachers are going to be providing that. But they might not be getting phonemic awareness instruction, which they should be. All teachers should be providing phonemic awareness instruction, but they don't all necessarily provide it. So likewise, parents oftentimes, they don't know to teach phonemic awareness, but they are teaching letters. So it's kind of, if kids aren't picking up letter knowledge, it's a kind of a sign they're having difficulty with learning there. So that might be is probably why letter knowledge is the best single predictor. But whenever we also assess phonemic awareness, that significantly adds to our ability to predict which students are going to have difficulty with learning to read. So what, some of the research suggests that just longitudinal studies that just looking at phonemic awareness alone is not a good predictor of future reading ability, but looking at future phonemic awareness does add to our ability to understand or predict students' later reading achievement. So in mid to late kindergarten, it becomes possible to identify those students who may need more explicit intervention in phonemic and other phonological awareness skills. Even when good classroom instruction is provided to preschool and kindergarten classrooms, approximately 20% of children fail to acquire an adequate foundation of phonological awareness. So that's 20% whenever we are actually providing that classroom instruction. There are a lot of schools where that instruction is unfortunately not provided sufficiently. And that can vary. Sometimes it's because teachers might not know how to. Sometimes it might be because teachers aren't being told that they need to. Um, and then, there are some classrooms, I would say, where not all kids need it because kids come in knowing it. So, there are some families that the parents and the kids work on phonemic awareness and phonics, or mostly phonemic awareness maybe, before the kids come to school, because they work on nursery rhymes, they just do rhyming, they play word games. Those are some things that a lot of families do. So some kids might enter kindergarten already having a pretty decent skill set in phonological awareness. And for those kids, it's not as important for us to provide that instruction. But for any kid who lacks it, it's essential that we are providing it to them. And even if kids are getting it somewhat at home or have received it somewhat at home, they probably can benefit greatly from having additional instruction in phonemic awareness. There's pretty strong evidence for a genetic cause of reading disability, with deficits in phonemic awareness found to be primarily a hereditary factor. So while that is true, undoubtedly true, we also know that having that instruction is also essential and important for students. So lack of instruction can also be a cause of lack of phonemic awareness skills. So we see that lack of exposure to oral language and literacy from birth to preschool is a big predictor. If children are not provided opportunities to listen to and interact with language in multiple contexts, their background knowledge about sounds, print concepts, and vocabulary concepts will be negatively affected. We know that there's great discrepancy in the number of words and the amount of different language and the way kids hear language from kids from low socioeconomic status to middle economic status and high economic status. So if you're just hearing a greater number of words, if words are being pronounced clearly and understandably, that it better exposure to oral language is going to help and develop individuals' phonemic awareness skills and just their oral language skills in general. So I'll show you some information. So here are just some common core standards that we see. So students demonstrate understanding of spoken words. And remember, so this is spoken we have here, not written, but spoken words, syllables, and sounds. So recognize and produce rhyming words, count, pronounce, blend, and segment syllables in spoken words, blend and segment onset rhyme and rhymes of single syllable spoken words, isolate and pronounce the initial, medial vowel, and final sounds in 3 phonemes. So with consonant, vowel, consonant words. So you'll hear that, example, or you see CVC a lot. Whenever we see CVC, that means consonant, vowel, consonant, which is, words like bat. So B is a consonant, T is a consonant, A, E, I, O, U are our, and sometimes Y are our vowels, right? So, but this is not typically, with this, we aren't including the consonants at the ending of L, R, and X because of the difficulty that those present. Add or substitute individual sounds in simple one-syllable words to make new words. So those were some of that syllable segmenting and blending information that we talked about whenever I talked about different skills that we should be practicing with kids. These are actually taken from Georgia's standards of excellence, so the standards that teachers in Georgia should be teaching to kids in kindergarten. Looking at phonological awareness, we see, again, recognize and produce rhyming words, count, pronounce, blend, and segment syllables in spoken words, blend and segment onset rhymes of single syllable spoken words, isolate and pronounce. So these are those same ones that we saw in these previous signs. So Georgia has basically adopted these Common Core standards. We see even when we go into first grade, we still are looking at having phonemic awareness skills there. So only produce single syllable words by blending, orally produce single syllable words by blending sounds, including consonant blends. Isolate and pronounce initial, medial vowel, and final sounds in spoken single syllable words again. I think that was on the previous one. And segment spoken single syllable words into their complete sequence of individual sounds. So that's a step further than we were going in that previous year. We see going back, we see some issues of, just print concepts. Some might call these things print awareness. This is some other foundational skills we see. So that just seeing kids follow words from left to right or top to bottom and page by page. Kids, you can take a kindergarten student in their second, third week of school and put a book in front of them and see how they basically put the book there with the spine on the left column, and do they put it in the right direction, so it's as opposed to upside down. That just provides you sort of a quick indication, has this kid been exposed to reading at home? So that's a really quick, easy indicator of kind of understanding of also their ability, or they've seen letters before, so are they seeing which direction letters go into. Those are just some really easy print concept quick tests that we can do with kids to see early on what their exposure to reading or to language and so forth has been. So understanding that words are separated by spaces in print, recognize and name all upper and lowercase letters of the alphabet, or some other print concepts. Now notice here, because what we're going to be talking about phonics in a second. So recognize and name all upper and lowercase letters of the alphabet. That's print concept. When we talk about phonics, phonics is that letters represent sound. In this part right here, print concept is just recognizing the name of all upper and lowercase letters of the alphabet. So that's not having the sound with them. So print concept is not having the sound. Print concept is just recognizing those letters. So we don't have to come back to this sign. Let's just looking at some of the standards of excellence for phonics. Oh, oops, sorry about that. Um, so demonstrate basic knowledge of one-to-one letter sound correspondence by producing the primary or many of the most frequent sounds for each consonant. Associate the long and short sounds with the common spellings for the 5 major vowels. Distinguish between similarly spelled words by identifying sounds of the letters that differ. Okay. Looking into first grade, decode regularly spelled one-syllable words, know the final E and common vowel team conventions for representing long vowel sounds. Use knowledge that every syllable must have a vowel sound to determine the number of syllables in a printed word. Decode 2-syllable words following the basic patterns by breaking the words into syllables, and read words with inflectional endings. All right, so those are, definitely higher level. We see a lot of growth in word reading between kindergarten and first grade. There's an amazing number of words that become part of individuals' sight vocabulary, and just their overall ability to read from kindergarten to first grade is astonishing. So moving on to phonics instruction. So phonics instruction teaches children the relationship between graphemes and phonemes. So remember, graphemes are the letters, or not remember, I guess we haven't said that before, but graphemes are the letters, and then phonemes are those individual sounds. So we're talking about mapping the fact that each letter has sounds, and we put those sounds together to make up words. So whenever we're doing phonics instruction, we're helping kids understand the relationship between these labels. So our relationship labels, so grapheme, phonemic relationships, letter sound association, letter sound correspondences, sound symbol correspondences, and sound spellings. These are all kind of pretty much just the same thing, that we're teaching the kids, that relationship between graphemes and phonemes, that letters make sounds, and then that we put those letter sounds together to make words. Phonemic awareness is just that words are made up of sounds, and we put those sounds together to make words. So goal is we're helping children to learn and use the alphabetic principle so they can recognize familiar words accurately and automatically and decode new words. So we teach phonics so that students can read words accurately, read words and text accurately. They read those words and text accurately repeatedly, which helps them to understand the text, and they also just get rewarded, right, for by understanding the text, as well as praised by parents and so forth. So that behavior of reading the words gets reinforced, and then those through continuous repetition of that and practice with that, those words become automatic. So they begin to respond to those discriminative stimuli automatically. And what that tends, whenever that happens, words are responding to words automatically, we say it's become part of their sight vocabulary. They also need this to be able to then decode new words, right? So we're constantly seeing new words. Even you as adults, we're seeing new words, and we, without realizing it, use phonics in order to be able to decode those new words. So these are morphemes, are the smallest grammatical unit in a language. So the phonological structure consists of sound units, whereas the morphological structure is comprised of units of meaning called morphemes. There are several types of morphemes, including root words, so like fish, plant are 2 different types of root words, and affixes, which are further categorized as prefixes like in, pre, etc., and suffixes, ing, able, or some suffixes that we commonly see. So, another, think of another prefix would be un, right? So I'll say that over again. The phonological structure consists of sound units like and ch, whereas the morphological structure is comprised of units of meaning called morphemes. There are several types of morphemes, including root words like fish and plant, affixes, which are further categorized as prefixes like in and pre, as well as suffixes such as ing and able, ing and able. So those suffixes help add, affixes and suffixes add meaning to our words and help in understanding how to read words. So some morphological awareness measures is we might just put the word growth, and then we're asking the person to say she wanted her plant to, and they would need to say growth. We'd say runner, and we'd read how fast can she, and we're expecting the reader to say run, right? Fifth, the boy counted from 1 to what? We're expecting them to say 5. Here another type of example. So these are nonsense words, but they follow some morphological structure, right? So we could, by using morphological structure, testing someone's morphological awareness, we can see, or we can use these sentences to test that. So the blank boy plays soccer. Would it be the twigness? No, the twigish, the twigment, the twiction. So it'd be the twigish, right? So because you might also say like the sleepish boy plays soccer. So it'd be twigish in that example. The girl dances spitterish, spittered, spitterly, spritting or spriting. I'm not sure what that'd be. So the girl dances spitterly, right? So like just the girl dances wonderfully. So we can, by knowing how the grammatical units in language, we can see what words might belong in sentences and be able to also, it helps us out with spelling, and it helps us out with breaking up and reading words because we know what to expect based upon the context of the sentence and based upon what we've just learned through phonics. And I'm sorry, not through what we've learned through our morphological awareness instruction. So morphological awareness is another area that we should be pointing out to kids whenever we are working with them. So, you know, we say we should be showing them with the word runner that the root word of the word runner is run, and that we add on the ner part sometimes to, you know, so to make it a noun, right? So we should be showing these things explicitly to kids whenever they are ready for that sort of information, which is, to be honest with you, not until probably second or third grade that we might be starting to teach that information explicitly to them. Orthographic rules. So we have orthographic rules of spelling. I wanted to read one more, kind of give you another statement about this previous slide. I'm sorry. So phonological awareness aids students in making estimated pronunciations of unknown words. However, the morphological structure also influences the pronunciation of words. For example, the sh sound in dishonest and in dish are pronounced differently due to the phonological structure influencing dish and the phonological and morphological structures influencing dishonest. So that's another way where things become difficult in our English language, because you know, hopefully or ideally we would see the two letters S and H together and we would know that it makes the sound sh, but it doesn't make the sound sh in the sound dishonest, even though it makes that saying the sh sound in the word dish. So let me read this to you again in case you want to take this note down. Phonological awareness aids students in making estimated pronunciations of unknown words. However, the morphological structure also influences the pronunciation of words. For example, the sh sound in dishonest and in dish are pronounced differently due to the phonological structure influencing dish and the phonological and morphological structures influencing dishonest. So we're not able to just use phonics whenever reading the word dishonest. We also have to basically understand our phonological awareness and our morphological structures that make up words. These complex rules that make up the English language is what makes learning to read difficult for students. So we have orthographic awareness also, which is basically just sort of rules of spelling. So these are just some examples. We could again test kids' orthographic awareness by giving them these sort of things and seeing how good they are at differentiating what are common spellings and what are not common spellings. So, where you would ask the student and individual to circle um, the more likely word that nonsense word that you might see in the English language. So with the first two, you would pronounce both of those mirror, but the one that would be more likely to be correct is M-E-E-R, right? Chi would be C-H-E-E would be the correct one. Dree, it looks like all the correct ones are on, well, no, Dree would be correct, the E-E. Tud we might see, we wouldn't typically see a double H in anything. And then the last one would be the one on the right, E-T-T-I. So we see double T's, but we never see double V's in our language. So just defining these terms for you. So orthographic awareness, the ability to manipulate and reflect upon the written representation of one's language. Phonological awareness, the ability to manipulate and reflect upon the sounds of one's language. Semantic awareness, we haven't gone over that one yet, but that is just the knowledge about how meanings are organized in a language. And morphological awareness is the knowledge about the pairing of sounds and meaning in a language. So it's kind of taking, in some ways, taking phonological and semantic awareness together whenever we're looking at morphological awareness. But it's more than that as well. So you all read this article, but there's just some sort of important things I wanted you to look at in addition to these things, those questions that I will present you with to make sure you know. But so the Mesmer and Griffiths article, I think it's not a study, but it's kind of very descriptive of stuff, and I think gives some important information. So what everybody's selling it, but just what is explicit systematic instruction. So one of the things that Mesmer and Griffiths say is that reading involves recognizing words and then understanding the individual and collective meanings of those words, with the ultimate goal being to get the meaning of the text. They say that phonics, along with other strategies, is used to recognize words, according to Erie. So Erie suggested 4 strategies that a reader might use to recognize a word. They might use predicting, which is using the context and linguistic knowledge to make a likely guess. So just while you're reading the passage, a student might use predicting, so using the context of what they've read already and linguistic knowledge to make a likely guess. Hopefully they'll also use decoding, so converting individual letters and patterns of letters into sounds and blending these sounds. They'll use analogy, which is using word parts, including morphemes, to analyze the structure of a word, and recall, retrieving a known word from memory. Decoding and analogy strategies both require knowledge of phonics. Okay, so even though you have decoding and analogy, and you have to have both of those to be able to, or both of those require phonics. You do those 3 things, or especially those latter 2 things, decoding and analogy, to come up with that word. And then once we've done that repeatedly, then ideally we're able to recall words, right? Because those words become part of our sight vocabulary. So one of the articles that I did not have you all read is one, and I used to have people read, but is one by Foreman and Torgerson. So they, well, anyway, that doesn't matter to you. So these were 2 people who were part of the Florida Center for Reading Research, which does a lot of great reading research. So why is just using literature-based instruction problematic? So now people have kind of, a long time ago, reading instruction, especially in the early grades, was heavily phonics based. So we would have reading series that basal reading series kids would use. And for the most part, there was structure in those reading series. So one story sort of built upon the next story in what skills we were expecting kids to have. So a teacher could really, before presenting a story to students, or before having kids read a story in their basal reading, go over a lot of the words that were in there, and they would have similar rhymes in those words, right? So the kids would know the onset letters because that's kind of onset rhyme because that's taught, and they have that, and then maybe they teach the rhyme, and there's a lot of those words in that text, so kids can get a lot of the can read on their own a lot of the words in the text. So that, story one maybe has a lot of the at sound in it, and then maybe story two has a lot of the it sound in it, the rhyme words in it. Well, story two would have both the at rhyme and the it rhyme there. So we just keep building on that, so that we're just continuing to build new rhymes and more words that kids are able to recall, and continue practicing ones that we've had from the past, right? So more and more opportunities to respond with those words, putting those older words together with newer words, promoting generalization, and so forth. Then we moved into literature-based materials, and literature-based materials had more of a focus on what they thought kids might be interested in reading. And the idea was, if they're interested in it, they will learn how to read. So it wasn't considering science and the fact that we need to develop basic skills in order for kids to read, in order for them to read the material. It doesn't just require interest. They require phonics to tackle those new words and to learn those new words, for those words to become part of their sight vocabulary. Uh, so one of the things that Foreman and Torgerson were saying um, in this paper is, so trying to answer why is just using literature-based instruction problematic. And one of the things is literature-based instruction does not control for difficulty. So the words may be too difficult for kids to read. The vocabulary may be above the child's level. The students have to be able to read to be able to understand. But phonics works best for all students, and it works best whenever it's taught in small groups, and it's integrated with phonemic awareness instruction. So kids have to have some basic phonemic awareness, but then we keep integrating our phonics instruction along with our phonemic awareness instruction, because kids have to be able to blend those sounds together. I've talked a lot about in this class about the fact that we have to think about what skill we're working on at that time. So phonics is the fact that letters are made up, or letters represent sounds, and we can put those sounds together to make words. Phonemic awareness is the ability to awareness that words are made up of sounds, and we can blend those sounds together to make words. Okay, so whenever we are trying to get kids to blend the C, the A, and the T together, and they have those letters, and they know the sounds that the letters make, they have to have the phonemic awareness to be able to blend them together. They have to have those skills to be able to do the blending. So we can teach that blending by really focusing just on the phonemic awareness. Once we get some basic phonemic awareness and blending skills down, then we can start doing phonics. And then once we do that, we can really integrate phonemic awareness and phonics together. So we must teach children the systematic link between phonemes and graphemes. So phonemes are the individual sounds that make up the word's language. We talked about that before. And graphemes are the symbols, which are the letters that represent sound. So I'll kind of repeat. So Foreman and Torgerson emphasize the need to teach children the systematic link between phonemes and graphemes. For example, we must explicitly teach that the M, in map makes the same phoneme as in the word mop, and vice versa. Explicitly teaching students phonics in this manner promotes generalization of the skills being taught, as opposed to just hoping that they will figure it out on their own. So whenever we talk about explicit instruction, which you all have read about some in the articles that you read, when we talk about explicit instruction, we're explicitly teaching them that the sound that makes up the word map is also the same that makes up the word mop. We can't leave it to chance that students are going to recognize that. we have to point that fact out. We have to make that explicit to them. We have to show it to them. We have to model it for them. So, and by doing that, we're promoting generalization. We're promoting the likelihood that if they see the word mutt, let's say M-U-T, that they're going to be able to do mutt, because they've learned that for mop and for map, even though we've changed the rhyme part of that is helpful. I'm just trying to think. MIP maybe is MIP is a fake word, but the better example there would have been MIP, but MIP is not a real word. So I can't think of another M vowel P word right now. So, but hopefully you all get it. So we have to explicitly teach that onset rhyme works across those words. And by explicitly teaching that, we are promoting generalization and we're providing effective instruction. Leaving it up to chance is not what we should do. So we always talk about, we've mentioned in this class and you will talk about in other classes, we don't leave generalization up to chance. We have to promote or program for generalization. So I'll kind of reread that sentence one more time. So Foreman and Torgerson emphasized the need to teach children the systematic link between phonemes and graphemes. For example, we must explicitly teach that the in map makes the same phoneme as in the word mop and vice versa. Explicitly teaching students phonics in this manner promotes generalization of the skills being taught as opposed to just hoping that they will figure it out on their own. Explicitly teaching students phonics in this manner promotes generalization of the skills being taught, as opposed to just hoping that they will figure it out on their own. So in their study that they go over in this paper that was presented in this manuscript, rather, Foreman et al. Compared direct instruction in letter sound correspondence practiced in controlled vocabulary text. That was one condition, and then there was a less direct instruction in sound spelling patterns embedded in trade books. And then the third condition was implicit instruction in alphabetic principle in trade books, so implicit code. The direct code resulted in greater improvements than implicit, and rate of improvement was moderated by initial levels of phonemic awareness. So not only did this study provide the importance of doing direct instruction, but it also talked about or showed the importance of phonemic awareness. So kids who had greater phonemic awareness skills were able to benefit more so from that direct instruction than kids who lacked those skills to begin with. So all groups benefited most from the direct instruction, but we saw that that was moderated by kids who had already had phonemic awareness skills. So this study goes on in suggesting that at-risk students have adequate general verbal ability and cognitive weaknesses limit their phonological domain. They're delayed in both broad and oral language knowledge and phonological and print-related knowledge. So those are some of the characteristics of individuals who are at risk for developing later reading disabilities. So they have adequate general verbal ability, and they're just adequate, not great, just adequate, but have cognitive weaknesses that limit their phonological domain, and they're delayed in both broad oral language knowledge and phonological and print-related knowledge, okay? These risks are generally the results of genetics, as well as the environment often denies them adequate learning opportunities. But regardless of the cause, regardless of students' cause in having difficulties learning to read, instruction for children who have difficulty learning to read must be more explicit and comprehensive, more intensive, and more supportive the instruction required by the majority of children. There's no evidence to suggest that either cause responds differently to instruction. Okay, so there's no, what this is saying, so there's no evidence to suggest that whether someone has, their difficulty learning to read is due to genetics, or their difficulty learning to read is due to the environment not providing them with adequate opportunities. Students who are having difficulty learning to read because either of those difficulties are going to benefit from the same type of instruction. They're going to benefit from instruction that is more explicit and comprehensive, more intensive, and more supportive than instruction required by the majority of other children. And it's not that other children would not benefit from that level of explicit instruction and so forth. It's just really that they don't require it. They're able to learn quickly and fast without having that high level of explicit and intensive instruction. It still needs to be explicit for everyone, but it needs to be more explicit for some students. And we've talked about this in class before, that it's that just kids who are struggling to learn to read just need a higher level of explicit instruction, and they need more opportunities to respond. So effective interventions for almost all children highly at risk for reading disabilities should contain strongly explicit instruction in the knowledge and skills required for learning to read words accurately and fluently, and that this instruction should be balanced and integrated with explicit instruction in other language and reading skills that are also important for reading comprehension. And what are those other skills? Spelling, morphology, orthography, vocabulary, and comprehension skills or strategies. Okay, so those other skills are spelling, morphology, orthography, vocabulary, and comprehension. So one of the things that is also discussed in the Foreman-Torgerson article is that one-to-one intervention reading may not necessarily be more effective than small group instruction. So there's not been, it would require many of studies, but there haven't been those many of studies that tell us why exactly one-to-one intervention is not any better than small group instruction. For some students, it is. Some students really need the one-to-one instruction. But for most kids, even most kids who are struggling with learning to read, small group instruction has been shown to be just as effective. Probably, and kind of my guess and the guess of many people, is not just my guess, the hypothesis is that with small group instruction, you're still getting, or you're allowing kids modeling of other kids who are reading. And if you do it effectively, you can still maintain really high rates of opportunities to respond. They can hear other kids, and they're hearing modeling from other kids. They hear other kids being error corrected. So if we do it right, we're providing error correction. We have other kids modeling or blending the sounds together. And it could be both at the lower, someone who is a little bit lower than the one single student. So let's say we're talking about kid B. So for kid B, some kids are going to be higher than kid B. Some kids are going to be a little bit lower than kid B. So the teacher providing the instruction to kid A and to kid C, both of that instruction by the teacher could be helping the student. So it might be rehearsal, review of some materials for with the kid who is not performing as high as kid B, and it could be modeling of blending and reading of new words by that kid C. And kids C, who's the higher performing kids, might have better comprehension strategies that they're using and modeling and providing examples of. So if we provide small group instruction, we are not necessarily not helping a kid out as much as if we were providing small group instruction. And we should evaluate this with students, because if small group instruction is just as effective for them, well, then we can provide a greater number of students with instruction whenever we're providing small group instruction than if we're trying to do it one-to-one all the time. Another critical element of classroom instruction that Foreman and Targeson talk about is providing quality scaffolded instruction. And scaffolded instruction involves finely tuned interactions between the teacher and the child that supports the child in accomplishing a task that that he or she could not do without the teacher's help. So there's two types of scaffolded instruction. So it requires careful sequence skills that are systematically taught and involve opportunities for the child to practice. So carefully sequencing skills are systematically taught and involve opportunities for the child to practice. And then teacher-student dialogue, the child is presented with the task, the students are allowed to respond, the teacher provides direct feedback regarding the correct components and assists in making the next step. The student makes the next step and is provided with immediate feedback. So we're just kind of, that sounds a lot like opportunities to respond that we've talked about. But in both these situations, the teacher knows what's going to happen and the teacher is prepared for what's going to happen next, and trying and working to make sure that the kid does it correctly. So in essence, we're working on doing errorless learning here. So intervention for children with LD should be different from typical classroom instruction. They should be more intensive, more relentless, more precisely delivered, more highly structured and direct, and more carefully monitored for procedural fidelity and effects. Okay, so so essentially with that, so more intensive, so more minutes of it, more opportunities to respond in it, smaller level, small group instruction, more directly attending to the specific needs of the student, more relentless, meaning we just don't give up, more precisely delivered. We are really focusing on the skills that we're targeting at the time, and it's really specifically at that kid's instructional level or need. It kind of goes into intensity there as well. More highly structured and direct, so we know at all times what we're going to be doing next. We have a strong plan for instruction, and not just like what we're going to be doing over the next month. We know what we're going to be doing within sections. We have planned instruction, and more carefully monitored for both procedure fidelity to make sure that we are implementing it as prescribed, and we are monitoring intervention effects on a daily basis. Okay, so whenever we have really intense kids, that's what we should be doing with them. Okay, I'm going to pause this and